really boring. Or your good phone. Okay, it's 10 o'clock, so we're gonna get going. Call the meeting to order. Next on our agenda is approval of the agenda with any additions. I would like to recommend one change, is that item 7F will not be a closed session.
And that's
Oh.
updated.
Okay, so, that will not be a closed session. Open Meetings Act does not, suggest that we need to do that, so. Any other additions to the agenda? Otherwise, motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I'm gonna be looking over there for nods, so, all right, so all in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda. Approval of public comments on agenda items. What you have on the agenda is a little different from the past. We have public comments on agenda items early, and then at the end we have public comments on non-agenda items. So first thing we'll do is public comments on agenda items, and if you're to speak, if you could introduce yourself, so we can have your name for the record. So any public comments on agenda items? Yes.
Penny Swan, I'm a citizen of Hillsdale. Around February 2017, Mr. Budd disclosed publicly to the MSCPA that he was being appointed to the Board of Directors of Century Bank and Trust, which is run by Mr. Paul Beckhusen's twin brother. Does anyone on the board view this as a potential conflict of interest? Apparently, based on the specifications of this building, it was always intended to house the MSCPA. Given that information, did Mr. Paul Beckhusen ever publicly disclose to the MSCPA that his wife was being hired by the selected contractor? Does the MSCPA view this hiring of Mr. Beckhusen's wife appropriate? Also, I find it concerning that Mr. Budd was appointed to Mr. Beckhusen's brother's bank at the same time Mr. Beckhusen's wife was being hired by the building's contractor, and none of this was apparently disclosed to the MSCPA board. It is my understanding that the MSCPA pays over $6,000 per month to rent this building. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that equates to over $1,000 employee per month. I think this is a complete waste of money, and the MSCPA offices should be fined new offices. That comes out of my pocket. I live on Social Security. That's what's got me all upset. You're taking money away from all of us that scrimp and save and decide if we can buy toothpaste, we can buy deodorant, we can buy food. Every penny you guys waste is taking money out of my pocket and every other pocket and the citizens that are involved in this board. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Other comment? Oh,
I just wanted to thank you for making the public comment in the beginning. Good start.
well, typically in the past, we haven't had many public here, so thank you for coming. Other comments from the public, the audience? Okay. Let's move on to approval of minutes. We have June 24th, regular board meeting minutes. Motion to approve, and support.
Clinton will make that motion.
I'll support.
Can we say our names or cities to help?
Okay. Union City Mathis will support.
Thank you, Ted. Any corrections? In that case, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes approved. Financials, we have the May and June financial statements and investment reports. Before we ask any questions about, can we have a motion to approve those reports?
Clinton will make a motion to receive and file those reports.
Hillsdale will second it.
Okay, questions or anything, Bob, you want to elaborate on, or Paul?
Just that the
June is still a draft because the auditors haven't completed the audit yet.
Any other questions? We have motion, support, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have those approved, accepted, and put on file. We have the May and June invoices for approval. Motion?
Clinton will make a motion to approve those invoices.
Union City will support. Sorry.
That's okay. All right. Any questions on any of the invoices? That's great. All right. All in favor of approving the invoices, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have the invoices approved. All right. Anything other financial?
Yes, there's a motion that the board needs to take action on, I'll throw it up here, but retro to fiscal 2019 to defer all severance charges related to the non-extension of the general manager's contract, so such time those charges are paid and subsequent bills of the members, or until a renegotiated employment contract is finalized in which the severance liability and related deferral will be reversed from the agency's financial statements.
So basically, our accountant would like the books to reflect the potential of that liability is what I'm seeing.
Yes,
Okay.
straight from the auditor's language.
And actually, the costs have to be accrued. This is actually more importantly, this defers it so that it doesn't affect the 110 coverage on the bond. So
Okay.
the fact that they have to be accrued is accrued, this is actually to defer the cost until such time that you might pay them out if that happens. So
Okay.
the accrual is automatic, and that's what
Okay.
puts us in violation of the covenant if we don't defer them.
And make a motion to defer them.
Right.
Okay. And the auditors,
This language was approved, the auditors, we sent it to the auditors and they said,
okay. I guess based on the auditor's recommendation and our financial.
Can you put that back up, Paul?
I'll wait till Dave's done.
And, Paul, you said this language came from our auditors?
Bob drafted it, but they okayed it.
I drafted it, they had some recommendations, and then I sent it back to them, I sent this back to them, they said that would be fine for what they needed.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for
Sure.
Bob.
Please go direct, don't have to go through me.
Bob, so if, for example, Hillsdale has expressed its desire to move on to another agency. Some on the board have expressed interest in renewing or approving a new contract with the general manager. If Hillsdale leaves prior to the end of the general manager's current contract year, does this obligate us to anything under what would be considered a new contract?
I would like to say, that's a question for a lawyer, not for myself. I mean, I would almost, I'd say that's a council, I mean, it is a liability, but it's however you would do a dissolution as far as separate out the cost of everybody. I don't have the, I mean, this liability would be put on the agency's books. Okay, and it's also being inferred. However, if it's in a case where Hillsdale, let's say, left the agency prior to June 30th of next year, I mean, that's what's on the books, so. I don't have the legal answer to that, this is what I'm saying.
I guess my question boils down to, say, this board, or the majority of the board extends and Mr. Beckhusen works for the agency for another year or two
Mhm.
beyond June 30th of next year. My question, I think you know what I'm asking, is are we obligated 2 years from now, or 2 years from the end of that contract, to pay severance? And that would be a legal question.
I mean, it's not a question, I don't have the answer to answer that question. The whole thing came up for the fact that this was terminated, the contract was not extended before June 30th, that's why I had the financial statements this year. So the triggering of that actually happened in June of 2019, if you wanna get to that. I mean, that was the trigger, right? The trigger event was a non-extension of the
The
contract.
non-renewal, yes.
Yeah, and that's what the auditor said, okay, you should record the liability then. So the liability was created then, I guess is what I'm saying, not in June 30th of 2020. It was created by the non-extension.
But if it is renewed, the liability is reversed off the books from what it says.
Then you would be
Correct.
under the terms of the new agreement.
The new agreement, okay.
Yeah.
That may be a question also as part of the Courtney study, as we move forward. You know, looking at all the pieces of how the agency could look in the future. I would think, John's no attorney, but I think it's a piece that should be maybe part of that study when, you know, Kevin and Dave are, you know, working with John as he moves forward with that study.
Mhm.
And part of that too, when the study comes back, we'll still need legal advice, because these are issues that only lawyers can address. I guess my thought is that this is a liability that was incurred that you two members voted on, so that liability would carry forward too with you, because was, you know, one of the 5 votes. And they also look going forward that you'll never, unless you truly leave and sell all your assets, you'll always be responsible for the administrative costs of the agency. That just won't go away.
It's just more of an auditing
Understood.
thing at this point, so how it gets paid out is always a legal issue. So I think from an auditing standpoint, this would be correct. Appropriate accounting, 'cause I'm assuming they're saying because there's a high likelihood of it being paid, are they just gonna footnote it? Or they actually want in the journal?
Oh, actually, we actually journal entry it. Yeah, that's what I say, so that's what I say, the accrual actually is on the books. And I did the accrual, the deferral before they did it in anticipation of it being passed today. Cause obviously, by putting the, let's say again, by putting the accrual in, it drops us below our 110 coverage on the bond. And that's the necessity for the deferral.
Is this for the auditors, Bob?
Excuse me?
Was this requested by the auditors?
When this happened, what I did is I sent the employment contract to the auditors. They reviewed it and they said, yes, the accrual needs to be booked. Then it was up to us whether we wanted to incur it right then, which obviously we didn't want to bill you in June for it, or to potentially defer it.
How's it?
Since there's not a 100% like, there's not a 100% guarantee it's gonna be paid out, it was more appropriate to defer it to a future period when it would be paid out if necessary.
If it is paid out, is that, project 1 allocations, is that how that's?
This would be on total energy, this is the
Total,
administrative cost.
oh, administrative, okay.
But administrative costs were just recently changed, wasn't something just changed to?
Just the pensions.
This project, thank you, I knew something was.
Very good questions.
Okay, Clinton makes a motion to, that motion, which was, somehow we'd like to have it in there though, Clinton makes a motion to support the recommendation from our auditor, and it would be that motion. I hate to do that to you, but I do want to have it emphasized that it's a recommendation of our auditors. And I support that motion, or make
Okay,
it.
good.
Yeah.
Is there support?
Support.
Okay. Other discussion? That's a good question earlier. Okay, we have a motion and support to approve the motion with the recommendation of the auditor. Susan will get that in there. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, any other financial, okay. Moving on, informational, we're sent the general manager's report. Let's go ahead, Paul.
got the report, and I'll just highlight a few things regarding, Project 4 ran a lot in July with higher, loads, so we dispatch quite often. We've executed the hedges for August and September for the gas supply. AMP projects, HVAC, there's some informational items on that. Plant continues to run well. There was a budget amendment by the participants, approved by the board to increase operating expenses and their revenues to offset the higher run time, so it's a net effect of 0 to the rates. Hydros picked up in May and started to tail off in June. July, they were improving again at the last meeting. Smithton actually has been was at 100% capacity factor back at the end of
So
July.
you're saying, I'm sorry, Earl. So you're saying it was, so they were running as full out as far as they can?
100% range, they were, yeah.
So after all that, zero capacity?
Well, the
Water's died down.
water in
now.
Mississippi got far enough down that it started to flow, so. But it started tailing back again, so I don't know, that was in July, so.
It's nice to get to 2%, that's what I was
But-
looking at. 82 to 100%, it seems like a.
Well, but again, Smithland is the unit that will produce
Yeah.
in the summer months because of the water level. You know, low water level is, on the Ohio River in general, is a benefit to Smithland because it's the last unit down the river. So high water, low water affects the units on the river sooner.
And Paul, these are in order of north to south on the riverhead.
East to west,
East
west
to west,
to east to west.
Okay, so Willow Island.
Willow Island's the one that's furthest up, so.
Okay, I was thinking that, but I lost track where Willow was.
Yeah, the graph is not in any, that's just a mixed match of them. Prairie State, finally started to run well. May was a tough month. June picked up, had a few forced outages, on unit number 1. But, they're working on that, the root cause. They've had some, issues with the, slagging on that unit. It's causing 2 leaks with, the slagging falling off and causing 2 leaks. Solar, July was the record month for the site, since it became commercially available. It was a good month for solar. We'll talk about capacity and future power supply here further in the agenda. We finalizing the settlements of the VAR charges with ITC and the O&O, so hopefully by next month we'll have a settlement agreement there that I can discuss.
Is the bars the consumers communities?
So these are, the O&O agreement is with, yeah, it's a consumer's agreement, so
Gotcha.
it's just on the cons side of the load.
I was thinking that, but I lost track.
Yeah. And then, just some miscellaneous information there, and, that's it, unless there's any
Paul,
questions.
Paul, why do you have that up there? I just want to just mention to the board that we will not be having a work session at the AMP conference. I'm not sure if I had said that earlier or not, but, so that, and the AMP conference is a day shorter.
I like the new format.
Yeah. The board spent a lot of time on trying to
Well, they succeeded.
shorten that up. The only other item is I put the link in there to the Line Workers Apprentice Program at AMP is kicking off, so that is gonna be a Northwest Lineman Certified line worker program. So bring a lot of value to members that would like to send their line workers down there for training.
So that'd be on par with the JMAT?
Yes, it's the exact same certification.
And it's the concept where they go down periodically there and do a lot of stuff online. Because we have the Northwest with our program, we do a lot of on-the-job with us, but we send our people to select things down there. So we can now change our program a little bit. I just printed this, last week and sent it to Mark, our superintendent, but we'll be able to tweak ours a little bit and maybe participate in future ones, but. we
Well, I'd like
doing
to
our own.
suggest anybody that's going down for the AMP conference, we'll take a little side trip down to that training center that, AMP has developed.
Good.
It's very nice. It's a separate, there was a building that came with the complex, and it was housed by a school, and that school moved out. AMP's moved into that training center. It's top notch. So,
That's wonderful. I mean, we like doing our own, but there's specialty things, getting inside of a transformer substation and stuff.
They've got
We need outsiders
hands-on,
to help us.
they've got real life hands-on. Yeah, it's a nice, they've done a nice job with it.
As our board member for AMP, I thank you a lot then, because that's gonna help us greatly.
So unless there's questions, that's all I have on my report.
One question, have we been able to get, the information Mr. Courtney's requested to?
All of it. Got
Thank you.
last Thursday. Wednesday, or Thursday.
Thank you for that.
Do we have an update on how that's going at all, or where we're at on that?
Yes, that's something that Dave and I have, and basically he's just getting information at the moment.
Okay.
Again, just last Thursday, he got it. Dave and I talked, tweaked the scope, I guess, and had I think a very good discussion with, John. And now it's just, he's got material and he'll be contacting some of us periodically and sort of plugging through like the outline says.
So he didn't have a timeline though, I mean, this is kind of, right, correct? Or-
There is in there somewhere, but I
Okay.
forgot what it was, 3 or 4 months, I
I think
sort
it
of
was 3 or
remember.
4 months.
I just don't remember, whatever the document said.
Or Kevin or Dave, did John say he would do any intermediate presentations, or is all on the way? I can't remember if that was anywhere in the proposal, is it just?
I don't remember, Dave, do you? I know he's gonna meet with us.
Specifically, but I think he was gonna meet with the communities.
Yeah, because he wants to see what each of us say outside of everybody, just to get your feel and your thoughts and everything, and that's important.
So he was gonna
He's
meet with
thorough.
each community, meet with everyone.
Yep, he'll want to sit down with you, or conference call, I don't know what, but he'll want to talk to each community, I don't think he said meet, but
Right.
I think he did, but.
In the beginning, I did suggest that he spend some real quality time with MPPA, because
Yes.
MPPA has changed since he looked at that 20 years ago for Marshall, so.
I think he made a comment on that too. And I know he'll be out talking to the agency, he's got a boatload of questions for Paul and Bob, and of course, he'll need just all kinds of documents. And it's very important to emphasize, this is just extremely important to get the engineering work done, to just see, all right, physically, you know, operationally, maybe not physically, can something be different and can we save money? And, you know, will it work? And then, once that's done, you know, they'll present and everything, but we will need legal opinion, because then you got legal stuff. John's good with that stuff, but he's not a lawyer, so we'll still need a lawyer to analyze something. But I'm excited, I think it's a good way to go.
Did you talk at all with John, or I mean, will we be working with Steve Mann, corporate counsel for legal? Is that the plan? Did you talk at all about that? I'm curious.
We didn't talk about the legal side of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He just made it real clear in his document, if you read it, that he's not a lawyer. We need to get legal opinion when he's done, but he's gonna give us an engineering opinion. Are there some operational efficiencies by doing things current or a different way of some sort? And he was looking at the same, he was looking, i.e. South Central, he was looking at AMP, he was looking at MPPA or other. I don't know what other means, and I don't think he does, but there could be another out there.
Well, you've got,
IMPA.
I was gonna say IMDA, but it's
Yeah.
IMPA, so.
So he doesn't do any of the legal or discussing contracts or things like we were discussing earlier about the
He just-
general manager, he just does the operational. Do we have a,
He does review of agreements and things with the agency
Okay.
as to how you function, but it's an engineering review, and John's really good at that stuff. I mean, that man's good. His answer's probably gonna be really close to what the lawyer says. I have a lot of faith in him, but he's not a lawyer, he can't give a legal opinion. It's not his area.
Should Paul at least forewarn, Steve Mann that, there may be something coming? I mean, is that,
I think from my my standpoint, my main concern is the legal stuff. I think forewarning would be a good idea, because I'm more concerned with the contracts that exist, and because we've expressed it, same as Hillsdale, a desire to explore other options there, and I think the contracts are our biggest question, more than operational, but, so I think warning Steve Mann would be a good.
That way, he at least will be able to, John, Courtney calls him, Steve will be able to talk, otherwise he would not be able to talk without knowledge from Paul, so.
I do not anticipate John calling Steve. I don't see him doing that at all. I mean, a day
But I
brief,
think-
I don't.
I wouldn't think you would until.
Yeah, later.
We would take the information from John
to our, whoever we decide to review.
I see it Dave's way too.
Yeah, okay, just thought I'd ask a question.
so that would be a second step in this process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
start with this and then go.
Yeah.
But letting Steve know so that he can talk to Steve would be a.
If it came up, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else, Paul? Anything else from staff? Okay. Rate stabilization update, you had a memo, it's on page 47 of our agenda, so.
Just an informational update, part of the policy every 6 months. We'll update rate stabilization calculations and provide that to the members. In this case, everybody passed in the evaluation, and the grade card, and then the projections that support that number, that rate stabilization number up here. The forward on the projected power costs, so these are the calculations that if the member wants to stabilize, what your rate would be.
Yeah, could you stay there, Paul, and keep talking, but I wanna ask a question.
So, again, so this is the 12-month total is the rate stabilization number that, we would pull from and add to the rate stabilization counts to keep that, billing number levelized. So, at this point, if there's a member that wants to, then we just need to be notified.
Okay. So in March of 2020, Marshall has a red, what does?
That's the highest draw, so if you recall the policy, we looked at the highest 1 month requirement as the bogey that you had to have in your restabilization account. So that number then flows back up to, here. We multiply it by 6.
Okay.
And then that gives you the minimum amount of your rate stabilization.
Okay.
How did, like Union City and Hillsdale, for example, just pulled their rate stabilization funds, and now we're 32,000 above, and Hillsdale is 40 or 400 or 350,000 or something like that. How did that change? Was that just from 1 year? Is it the change in the?
I just don't think we took a whole.
Oh, we didn't take-
No,
okay.
Hillsdale didn't take all of
Okay.
theirs, Union City took,
Union City.
Okay, so we didn't take it all, is what?
Union City.
and you add,
Someone exhausted theirs, however,
Huh.
remember there's that half
You add to it.
kilowatt set?
Okay, that's what's increasing it then,
Yeah, so
okay.
you can put
Okay.
in about, say, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 a month to it, so you're gradually growing it back. up.
Gotcha, okay. I was just curious how it changed.
Yep.
Thank you.
so again, just informational, if and when somebody wants to stabilize their rates, just let Bob know and
And
we'll process.
I'll just assume everybody's gonna keep going the way they're going unless I hear from someone.
Yep.
And when you look at the numbers on that one sheet that shows the balance, that's not like the capital money's not included in there or something, I don't know the right term.
No, this would just,
This is just rate stabilization.
Basically what goes on your bills. You mean, this is the rate stabilization.
Yeah, that's the rate stabilization balance, my 1.3 million is the rate stabilization, okay. Cause then on top of that, I got like,
That's not your other cash account.
yeah, I got like
Share the other cash
$500,000 in that, okay. That's what I was thinking, cause even Union City has another 100 or something in there.
Now, what'll happen is next month, once the audit clears, then we'll show a presentation for the cash reserves at June 30th, because that's an annual. This is a semi-annual presentation.
Okay.
We'll do the annual one on the 6/30 reserves once the audit clears, to show everybody where your cash is according to the cash reserve policy.
Okay.
Two different policies, rate stabilization, cash reserve. One's is annual, one is biannual.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we're on to other business, number 7, election secretary and assistant secretary.
So, Chris Bernard was the board secretary, so that position is, needs to be filled. The bylaws allow for an assistant secretary position as well, that can perform those duties in the absence of the secretary. The secretary treasurer position can also be combined, that was done in the past. Bylaws allow that, so, again, it's the board's pleasure as to.
So it can be a
how-
board member on that position or something too then?
Yeah, for years, going back and looking at, well, the bylaws that I sent copies of, you'll see that I think it was the commissioner from Hillsdale was the secretary treasurer, held that position for whatever, reason back then, so.
Well,
It can be,
I would make a motion that we approve Chris to be the secretary treasurer because he's interested in being on the board. He was complaining at the last meeting not having representation, so I will make a motion to promote him to that position then.
Who's the current?
Me?
Yeah.
What are the duties involved with secretary treasurer?
signing the minutes,
What's that?
Pretty much none.
He's not prepared.
I don't do it, I don't do anything different as the vice
I'm
president
not
either.
preparing.
Tom does all the work.
Alright.
well, not currently, that's why Susan's here.
Okay.
She may not be here every time though,
Yeah, so
she
that's,
volunteered.
Voluntold.
Volunteer.
So she isn't going to guarantee to be here, it could be somebody else, so she's just here for today.
I'm happy to do it, I don't have time to do like compile minutes and stuff, if that's what's required, that's gonna be a little more difficult for me. But,
Who's currently treasurer?
I think I am.
Yes.
That's fine, I'll step down. It's Chris, it's not a big deal.
I'm not asking for that, so I don't.
Oh, you made a big deal for it, so you must be asking for it.
I do think that we should have some representation on it, and
There you go.
I had suggested the last meeting what I suggested, it wasn't that, but I'm fine with it, so.
Can I amend my motion before someone supports it? I would like to make my motion that, Jeff be removed as the treasurer and Chris be made the secretary treasurer. I didn't realize he was it currently, so my motion, you'd
That's
have to
why I
turn it
brought it up.
down.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that, so you'd have to turn it down otherwise or vote it down. So if you allow me to amend it, that'd be my motion to withdraw your position and then have Chris be both.
I won't say anything until there's a second.
I'll second.
The treasurer side, Chris asked about the secretary side. We have a finance committee, which is currently you two. So, I was on the finance committee a long time ago, and I wasn't the treasurer, I think was vice chair at that time. So, the duties of treasurer, can somebody answer that question?
They would only be if
Probably-
we were to sell bonds, somebody would have to actually sign as the treasurer, that's the only official duty,
All right.
if it were to come up.
I think I had asked before in the meeting too about credit card statements, and you said the finance committee reviews those and stuff, so there's probably a couple more.
From the
duties,
treasurer?
right?
No, from the
No.
treasurer, no.
Oh, okay.
Finance
committee, okay.
Yes.
So the treasurer isn't on the finance committee?
No.
Okay, gotcha.
I didn't even know that.
And the
I just got stuff.
secretary and treasurer are both on the bank accounts. Okay, so we'll have to redo the banking resolution next month as well.
Okay.
Because technically they can sign on checks as well, in the absence of Paul and myself.
Okay. So can we reassign the duties of treasurer and then do the banking statement at the next meeting?
Yes.
The banking thing, we gotta say, we don't have it ready today, so it's gonna have to be the next meeting anyway.
Okay. All right.
That's one of the reasons we didn't make the changes until we got this position.
Okay.
So do we
Identify.
not wanna support that motion so we can change things, or what's?
No, we can, the banking resolution, we still have enough people to sign the checks. It's just updating it once we,
Okay, I just don't wanna mess that up.
no.
I've never had to do any check signing
Yeah.
in 2 years. and shit.
Which is good.
Okay.
There isn't any official duties.
You okay, Chris?
I'm fine, yeah.
Okay. So we have a motion support to have Chris become the secretary treasurer. And is there any more discussion? We can do this by voice vote. Haven't been asking those roll call questions, though.
Oh, yeah.
So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations.
I don't know.
It's a tough job. Just been out for 2 years. is a long
Someone's
time.
gotta do it.
The extra pay will make it worth it.
Yeah.
By the way, we don't get paid just for the audience. Sometimes we joke and it comes out wrong, so. All right, general manager goals. Kevin, I'm not sure exactly who's leading it.
Oh, whoops. So basically, what we did is we got together and we created some goals.
Ed, would you be willing to
Yes.
give that to Sue? So,
She could have mine
yeah,
afterwards.
no, I mean, she could have, Ed, I can get a copy later. so-
All right.
Okay.
So basically,
I got witnesses.
what we did is, the committee asked Dave and I to put stuff together, so I just tried to email out to everybody and said, hey, let's do some short-term goals for the general manager. We weren't looking for the long-term ones, we're trying to get a feel for, what could be done in the next 3 to 6 to 12 months. And it wasn't rocket science, people gave me their comments, I think I got 4 communities made comments, and it wasn't difficult. I think I took the chairman's, his sort of had a whole lot of things, and then I grabbed everybody else's, and if it was about covered in the chairman's, I crossed that one off, and so pretty much I have everybody's comments on here that submitted them, and just some are consolidated or worded slightly different, but it was no rocket science, because I did not want to exclude any members' comments, they just might be grouped slightly different. So, when we run through them, if you want, I mean, maybe we do them just one at a time and run through them real quick, board, I'm open, and Dave, you chime in anytime, because you're on the committee.
It's a pleasure of the morning, Dave.
Yeah, I don't know if we wanna
I don't wanna.
read them or.
I know.
I don't know.
Well, I think, is there any,
Picture of mine, I can look it up.
Well, I don't have it,
Oh, you don't
I
have
don't
a
have an
copy.
electronic copy to put on the screen.
well, may I suggest that, there's 14 on here. Is there any changes or anything that needs to be, first of all, let's go, is there any of these that should not be on here?
Or
And then-
tweaked.
And then the second thing would, is there any that should be added? So let's do the ones that we have in front of us that Dave and Kevin put together.
And just so the public knows, I emailed out to the board a couple weeks ago, maybe. Oh, I did 24th of July, so whatever date that was. So they've had a chance to see it, this is just, I thought maybe people might not bring it, so I'd have a paper copy.
Well, I'll read them. So the first one is improve communication with the board by giving a bi-weekly report on agency issues and a brief update on AMP board meetings is number 1. Number 2 was work jointly with board members to improve relations with member cities and their respective boards, commissions, and councils.
Dave, real quick, if we could just, a couple quick comments if you have after, I just had a comment on the first one, I don't on the second one. But on the first one, I look at it, maybe there's something from the general manager. It started as a weekly one is how it came out, but we do have his report, whatever I did with it, that he gives to us at the meeting, so that's one of the issues. And then with the AMP, I mean, we get an AMP report every week from them, every Friday they email us what the board's up to in AMP, so we do get really good things. So I did tweak that from weekly to like a bi-weekly thing, and some of it he might just cut and paste what they already give to us, so it's pretty straightforward.
I guess I was looking more, when I've had one of those, I don't know if anybody else did too, just more like saying, what is he working on? Not necessarily what the board is working on, but say, I worked on this, or I met with these people, so we know duties, you know what I'm saying? So, that was what I was referring to.
Regarding Ann?
No, just to say, hey, this week I'm meeting with X, Y, Z, I did this, and this, just kind of more of a, or hey, this is what my plans are for the week. That's not a detailed work schedule, but just something to kind of say that we can say this is going on.
And I view it too, it's maybe a status update on something, you know, so if you're doing the cold water project, project 4, you know, or something, the peaking plant, you can go, hey, we got this, something of significance. I really don't worry about, you know, your daily, weekly schedule, it's more, anything of significant update on a status is what I would be interested in, that kind of thing.
Are we talking like a typewritten report or just like an
Just
email?
email.
Just an email?
Short email.
Bullet points.
Okay, bullet
Short
points.
email, I mean, we're talking a paragraph, maybe 2.
Right.
Nothing fancy.
So Harold's working on this, Dave's working on this, Andrew's doing
For
this.
example, if Paul's meeting with on the Little Quinn, met with the partners and working on, you know, just, so.
And with this, for me to support that goal, it's gotta be something where I don't wanna micromanage him, I don't care about his daily activities. I need to know just updates on the important issues is all I care about. That's just my.
Exactly, I'm not asking for I want
Thank
to
you.
do this for this, I'm not asking for that.
Thank you,
I'm just
thank
saying,
you.
hey, here's my general outlook for the week, I'm doing this, and this, done. Or Harold's working on SDS, he did this.
Okay.
Real simple.
Cool. I don't wanna belabor the point, it's just quick updates on anything that's significant.
Of
The other things
significance.
don't care about.
Yes.
You know, the issue again with, and I'll just make my comment on the board, board meetings, there's a lot of that information that's privileged.
Yes,
So
understood.
there's just information that's not gonna be afforded the ability to.
And we do get a weekly update every Friday, you get an email late in the afternoon, so I mean, you get one and you know what's going on, and it's very thorough.
And if you wanna elaborate on our Michigan issues, you know, if it's, you know, that may have come up at the board meeting, or MISO issues, so.
Yeah, don't get carried away, you don't need a doctoral thesis.
And one thing I asked my council when I took my job 10 years ago is tell me if it's way too much or tell me if it's not enough. So we gotta, you know, we can't wait 3, 6, 12 months to say, hey, Paul, I really wanted this. Let them know that it's good, bad. and-
Especially like the first few weeks, I mean, make a comment, reply all and say, hey, yay, nay, whatever, that just helps them, which helps us. Cause one of the comments on the note on the bottom, we go through these, but we need to know, how do we quantify or whatever, measure. Sorry, Dave, okay.
We're on number 2.
Yes,
Number
three.
Yeah, we'll just talk as we go. So number 2, work jointly with board members to improve relations with member cities and respective boards, commissions, and councils.
The key on that goal, people need to let him know, he can't read minds. I mean, if you don't say he has a need, then he doesn't know. I've used him a lot with my backup generator and my capacity, he's been to our council 2 or 3 times, so he doesn't know if I don't ask him, so you gotta get with him. And he'll be glad to help you.
Yeah, and I guess from Hillsdale's standpoint, one thing I do wanna bring up, cause this is, you know, a relationship issue. And I know the board is aware of this. You know, my mayor has requested and has written a formal letter to the Attorney General's office to look at the building handling issue. I know I think the board is all aware of it, but if not, I do have copies of that request. I would like to put it in the record. I bring this up simply because as we talk about improving relations, that while this potential process would be potentially handled, you know, that might be kind of problematic for trying to improve relations while that evaluation could be done. So I just wanted to publicly state that and let you all know.
the Village of Union City will be in that same position as well. We've reached out, we've had some talks with, Lansing State Police as well, and there's some stuff going on there, so while that's happening, I think that might be an issue, so.
Number 3, assist Courtney and Associates with organizational review study. I think that's currently happening. Continue to work with MPPA on cold water peaking project. Evaluate potential savings by having cold water peaking project solely owned and operated by MPPA and agency members participating through MPPA. I think we've talked about that a couple times.
Do we have to make, is it October? Cause our board, unless you have a special meeting, but it's like early October, you make a decision, cause I think it's early November. Like November.
October, middle of October.
Middle of October, okay. Cause I keep thinking, we gotta decide by our meeting in October
How that's going to be handled if we're
what
going
we
to
as
participate.
Clinton are gonna do, yeah. And I'm still not sure what I'm gonna do.
And that, just in one question on here, you know, part of the issue was the savings on operating by the MPPA. You know, one of the issues of what we were looking at doing is having Project 4, same operators operating. So I don't think it should be excluded to have the MSCPA be considered in that operation, because it could be a savings the other way.
That's not the intent of the statement here.
I just pointed that out.
Thank you. The party that had it on once, we're assuming that we're gonna be participating in the agency and MPPA is gonna be participating, but can MSCPA be tied to a PPA and is there a savings? So, that kind of thing. I think it's a valid question. I don't know how it turns out, but.
Number 5, work with Cold Water to develop a plan to finance Project 4 through Cold Water to transition Project 4 out of agency. That was something I brought up at least once or twice. Paul did give me some information on that, that I'm reviewing, so that's where that item had came from.
And just for a little more follow-up, for those not familiar, the odds of that happening aren't good because the agency's full requirements and the agency has to do it. So it'd be an agreement kind of thing, but the way the agreement sits right now with all member communities participating is the agency will provide all that power. So there's an obstacle legally, which is what Dave probably is applying.
And I think that's something Courtney is also looking at, so.
Yeah.
And that's not saying you can call what it wants, just because we don't do power supply. So,
It's a question that was on there, and again, I put all questions on there.
And I guess the basis for my asking this question is, prior to the Project 4 cold water head engines that were retired and removed, we all have assets that are 100% our community. Should this asset, which is 100% cold water, be just to replace those ones that were retired? I know there's some nuances with the agency and such that will probably require legal consultation, but that was the basis behind my question.
And it's a valid question. I'd like to respond to that. I think it's a good question that can be looked at and, you know, see if there's pros and cons to it. Again, I think the all requirement's gonna kick in. The thing is, when you look at our member engines, well, I mean, ours are in the 70s, his are probably in the 60s, and they were put in, that's prior to the agency existing, and they were an existing asset, so that's why we each have our own. You own your hydro, I own mine.
But yeah, when we rebonded our hydro or redid that, we did it all under Union City, so I guess it
Okay.
confuses the difference.
But if you were to replace it with something else.
Okay, so it's something
That's
else.
just a financing
Yeah.
thing.
Okay?
It's a good question. It's
Yeah,
just, I think the
it's
odds are gonna
something-
say that legally you can.
So, number 6, succession plan for finance director responsibilities, evaluate whether it would be better to hire or contract those services.
Could this include also, which I think it's already, I'm planning to, is, you know, Bob having support, currently. I'd like to see that one really looked change the goal, but I would like, I really feel that we need to look at Bob having some backup support and Paul report back to us sooner than later.
The things that Dave and I talked about in here is, that's part of it, but you can't put everything, it's gotta be
I
short.
understood, but I
It's the
just-
same. Just so Bob knows, I mean, that's an option that we look at, but part of the goal here is, you know, I know in our community, there's a lot of people getting towards that retirement age, and so we're trying to transition plan and trying to figure out, you know, if the agency stays, you know, who's gonna run it. So it's all in there. and we
Okay,
just
well,
don't know.
I brought it up because I think it's something we.
And we're
Which
not
Paul-
trying to.
I know Paul.
We're not trying to
worries about.
encourage Bob to leave. We're very blessed to have a wonderful financial person. It's just like transition planning, what's the agency gonna do? Transition planning, what if Bob gets near retirement? So all those are in play and gonna be looked at, we hope. At least that's the subcommittee's intention.
Number 7, provide a backup staffing plan for project 4. And for the public, project 4 is the project that is in Coldwater. Number 8, continue talks with Maroa, staff for CHP.
Coldwater current project.
What is Maroa staff? I don't know that.
Moro is the greenhouse facilities, CHP is combined heat and power. Project 4 has the ability to send heat and CO2 to the greenhouse facilities to improve the economics of the units.
Number 9, finish Little Quinn evaluation.
If possible.
Yeah, but hey,
Not know what
maybe
they're-
finish isn't the right word, maybe it's continue.
Yeah.
At the moment, it
Finish.
just financially doesn't
I
work
think I
for
heard
us.
that, but
And-
finish might be tough, but I don't think they're ready to make some decisions, sounds good.
And for the audience, Little Quinn is the hydroelectric project in Wisconsin.
Yes,
And
northeast.
All right. Number 10, provide recommendations on Marshall Energy Center for capacity and energy.
And at this point, there's not numbers out there, so it can't happen, so.
Number 11, provide an update on the safety program, documentation, and SDS program.
Just so people know too, Harold and I are gonna be talking sometime in September to see if he can take over some of our stuff, so.
Number 12, after organizational review is complete, help board evaluate report findings and take action as deemed appropriate.
That comment was made open-ended, because we just don't know the results of it, so there could be 1 of 3 or 4 options, so it was left open-ended on purpose.
Number 13, assist members with load growth management, including ITC interconnections. And number 14, evaluate opportunities in market to hedge market risk.
And then the last footnote on there is that we need to discuss how the board will quantify or measure the results of the goal. We gotta keep that in mind, because if this is gonna be used to help evaluate the GM, how do you do some of that? Dave and I talked about putting in like, it's too complicated. We'll just get the goals out.
Maybe that's something the board should think about over the next month, how we might be able to do that.
And then we're gonna get to, if there should be any added to this, but one of the things, at least when I do my goals, I go back to council and give them a time frame. I can get this accomplished in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, or 18. So that would be something, Paul can look at this and start putting that timeline together. I think would be helpful to continue that discussion, which you said.
And some of these too, when we look at timelines, I do appreciate what you're saying, but in order for some of these timelines to be completed, we need to make decisions. And some of these things like study, I mean, that's out there, and it's just gonna be whatever, but there's certain things that he can't do anything till we make a decision, so. And there's other things like Little Quinn, well, at the moment, their price is higher than we're willing to pay, so unless they lower it, that'll just sit on there and never be addressed. But his actions will be met, because he's waiting to negotiate with them, they just don't have a good price, so to me, that's easy one. The price is too high, we're not doing anything.
Yeah,
But
there are some
still.
elements for sure.
What about additional ones, that any of the board would like to add or suggest to Dave and Kevin, or, I don't have any, but I'm just asking.
You gave plenty of time.
Well, my first 2 years in my job, they didn't give me any goals, and I've seen many city managers fail because they don't give goals. And, because what are you supposed to be doing? So I think these are really key, so thank you guys for taking them. Okay. Do we want to then, by motion, adopt these? So what's the preference of the board, or is it just have it on record that?
It's probably a good idea if we're gonna wanna go that route, either you do it here or do it in September, but up to the board, that probably would be good that we take action.
I'll make a motion to adopt the goal.
Second?
Clinton, Union City support, Clinton, or Union City motion, Clinton support, sorry. It's the other way around.
You switching jobs.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, wrong city.
All right. Any other discussion? Okay. Now we have a motion for these goals and support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No, this, approved, I, think them out, I was.
All right.
Pay attention, Michael.
No, I think.
All right.
I was reading that, I got lost in my thoughts.
Next thing on the agenda is the amendment to the bylaws concerning alternate commissioners. I asked the question, or there was a question that came up over of what the roles of alternates. I talked to Steve Mann, who's our corporate counsel at Miller Canfield. He gave us a letter, attorney-client letter, but in effect, what that letter said is, by state law, we cannot have alternates. There was the amendment to our bylaws in 1983 that put alternates, but that's in violation of state law. So we need to go through the process to amend our bylaws to eliminate the section in there on alternate commissioners. There's a notice to all the cities. Paul, you wanna walk through the process?
Yes, so, any change to the bylaws has to be issued to member communities and 1 month prior to this board adopting those changes. So any change, so we did this, which brought up was I was going through we had some bylaw changes back last year that got sent out. This board never took action to adopt those changes, and it was mostly semantics around address and things like that as far as relocation, but and there was another reason we held up on it because of some indemnification, looking to put some indemnification language in there for the board and staff. After legal review, that can't be done in the bylaws, it has to be done in articles of incorporation. So irregardless, that's the process. So any changes with this section, I would couple that back up with a memo with the other items that we sent out a year ago, just to get it back in front of everybody. And then after 30 days or a month, this board would then take action to approve.
So we're not taking any action today.
No.
The only action
Are we discussing today then, or?
we can, well, first of all, you as a board, or we as a board, have the right to, even, that we have an attorney-client privilege communication. As a board, we can vote to remove that attorney-client privilege, which, and you, the 5 of us have seen this letter. I think it's a great letter to take back to our boards and our councils as supporting it. And so if you all, I can't make motions, so.
I will make that motion. Remove the attorney-client privilege on this, on Steve Mann's letter regarding this.
And Union City will support Hillsdale's.
Now, what are we doing? We're looking at the bylaws, which is to amend the.
We have a letter from our corporate counsel which is Attorney Brian Cliff, the letter of July 23rd.
I don't see the package.
It's okay, can't see the package. It was a letter that was sent to you. It's about a page and a half letter that basically it's a legal opinion of all the court, when Act 448, which is a joint action agency law, was put together, the language there, and this was brought up back in the late 80s, after it was amended, to whoever was on the board. It was not us at that time, but, so what we're asking today is, there's a motion on the floor, is that this attorney-client privilege, we remove that attorney-client privilege from this letter. That way this letter can go to our board, and this is why we're asking for the amendment.
Okay.
I think this is just to try to rewrite a legal, it's easier just to see Steve Mann's letter to your
But
boards and councils.
if Steve does it, or has it, and we remove it, I would like there to be a new memo from him with a new date without the word attorney-client on
No.
it.
This, I've talked to Steve, he said, we have the right from the board to take this letter, and this is appropriate way. I'm not a lawyer, of course, you know.
No, I hear you.
But he says that we have the right, because I think this document is good, where you can go back and you can hand it to your counsel, and you can read why we have to do this.
But then just so there's no communication, and someone could come in the future and go, well, but you released this. I would just like, if we have this letter going out to the boards, then maybe there's a note or something on it that the board authorized it to be released, because I could see 5 years from now, someone saying, oh, but you released this, why can't I have this today?
Well, it's
I could
this,
see
but
confusion.
this specific letter that you're releasing.
I know,
It would be
Reflect that.
referenced in the
Yeah,
minutes.
it'd be referenced
I
in
know,
that.
but no one's gonna remember that.
That is true.
It's gonna
It's
turn
just
into a
circulating.
nightmare, and it'll be
There's
out
no
there.
risk on this.
Well, no,
No.
all I'm
No.
saying is that if this letter, and I read it, I just didn't remember, this one, but I've seen it was wrong on this one. All I'm saying is if there's a note on this letter that goes out, and it's a new letter that's being submitted to us, if there's a note on it, it could be typed or handwritten, I don't care, and someone sign it, and it just says, the board on, whatever today's date is, hate to say, authorized the release of this letter. So if it's sitting in my file, and all of a sudden, we decide to get, well, god darn it, they released that, why can't they release this on the future? We can at least say, hey, it was released by the board. That's all I'm asking, is there's no confusion, because I
And
can
that
see.
can come from me as board chair, or.
That'd be great, yep, just a note, it can be a note handwritten on it with a date, so
I don't
it's
want
all
to spend
clear.
any legal fees on.
No, I don't want that, that's all I'm
So-
saying.
It's easy enough if the memo goes out regarding this,
Yeah.
you can put a stamp on there inside the document that says, stamp it, just like.
And I do like it right on the document itself though, because I hear you, because then that memo disappears, and I could see it being used against you, well.
No, the document itself, just like you put a draft stamp on a document if you're confidential or anything else, you can put stamps that will be on the
Release.
document that can't be taken off the document.
Yeah.
Again.
Somehow just so it's noted that I'm comfortable with if we do that.
Because I think this will help my city council. I mean, it's right there, when Paul puts the request in, and we take it to our boards,
Well, and that's in reference to the change in the bylaws.
Yeah, this is, right,
Yeah.
this is the one that says authorization for alternate board members.
Yeah, I really don't need the letter to be released, I mean, but if you guys do, that's fine, but I don't, I mean, it's real clear, we got the memo here, and I can just state it's based on a document from our attorney, but.
Well, there's definitely things to discuss along this line. I do have thoughts. I don't know when I did type some out, but, I
Let's-
don't know if
can
we're
we-
discussing it not today, but I did want to clarify one thing you'd said that.
Well, could we
Oh,
maybe
oh,
approve the discussion?
then we're discussing.
And then then
Okay,
we can
gotcha.
discuss it further.
Gotcha.
So let's
Alright.
deal with release where it is public, so
Well, we have a motion, is that?
we do.
Yep.
And I'm gonna ask for a roll call vote on this.
Well, I thought we were going to discussion.
Yeah. We're still in discussion.
We're still in discussion, because he has questions, I
Well-
want to hear his
But I
questions
think,
before I vote.
I think the discussion, he's saying, I want to discuss things that probably are involved in the letter, so we have to clear it first before we discuss, I think is what.
Well, we have a motion and support we can discuss, so I can vote knowing all the things. I would like to know all the points before I vote on it.
I don't think I'm discussing points relative to
Okay, go ahead,
the
Chris.
release, I don't think I'm discussing any points relative to the release of the, removing the attorney-client privilege. There's no more discussion probably along those lines that I have.
I just wasn't sure you wanted to talk something.
Yeah,
about it.
well, I wasn't sure what we were doing after, if we voted and then we moved on, and I didn't get to say my couple things I wanted to, so.
I do
I
have
just didn't
something to say
understand.
in regards to the motion.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remove the attorney-client privilege because we've had this in place for almost like 36 years. We've been following these guidelines that we're replacing. So I think it's important, given that we've been operating under this current premise for, since 1983, that we release this so those folks
Yeah.
can see the importance of this as well.
And you got three of the alternates sitting in the audience here too, so. Okay, then Susan, if you have a question.
I got all of that except the date and who the letter is from.
It's a July 23rd, 2019 letter from Stephen Mann, M-A-N-N, at Miller Canfield.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna ask for a roll call. I don't know if I need it, but I'm gonna ask for it anyways.
Union City, Chris Mathis.
Yes.
Coldwater Commissioner, Jeff Budd.
Yes.
Marshall Commissioner, Tom
Tarkowitz.
Tarkowitz.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Hillsdale Commissioner, Dave Mackey.
Yes.
And Clinton Commissioner, Kevin Clark.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so it is be released. Paul, you have authority to, attach it to your memo, and if, and also to your boards, and I imagine Don wants one. Okay, Chris.
I had a couple thoughts. First off, I did want to clarify, Tom, you said earlier that the state law says that we can't have alternates. I did want to point out that it doesn't say that, and that's not even what Mann's opinion says. It does talk about the formation of joint action agencies and that you can appoint a commissioner. He's saying the absence of allowing a commissioner, or the absence of having authorizing a alternate, therefore, in his opinion, means that we can't. There's nothing in the state law that says you can't have alternates in the state law. I have talked to another attorney. I do think there's different ways to interpret this. I do think that Steve Mann's interpretation, as we have found recently in the last couple of years, especially with our group, we have found differing attorneys with differing opinions, and I do think that's possible here, and I'd be curious to research some more on that. I do think that my concern is that I'm not sure what problem we're solving, A, or who was upset about it, or how this came about, but it does feel like since the last year, since I think Bill had made, or my village president, Mr. Avery, made some comments about there being an appearance of impropriety, that there's been a movement to reduce the ears in the room or reduce the involvement in the room. And that concerns me, and it concerns the village, and that's the way that feels. Last month, we asked to have Bill with a closed session, President Avery in a closed session. That was denied. It was said Steve Mann said we can't. Steve Mann clarified in that opinion that it's up to and his quote was, "It's left to the judgment of the board to have somebody in there." The last thing I want to say is that, I think it's been discounted too as well, the general law village, under section 64.1 and 64.3 under the general law village, it provides the village president with sweeping authority over village matters, anything financial, and it says sweepingly, he can't be denied from any village matter. I've yet to see an opinion how that weighs against this, on some of these issues. I do think he has a nexus to some of these concerns and has an involvement in some of these, and I think General Law Village does give him some authority in that regard too, and I'd be curious to see on that. But my concern is my main concern is, feels like we've done this for 40 years and suddenly now we're going to remove more involvement and remove more ears in the room, and I think it's taking a step back when we didn't do this for the previous 40 years. We as the village should be able to appoint who we want to represent us on the board and have a say as the way that we would want. And I think we would, and while I haven't brought it to our board yet and haven't released this to our board yet, I feel confident that we probably would oppose amending the bylaw in that measure. So just wanted to speak my piece on that.
Well, when you look at it with Steve Mann, you have to look at, he's our lawyer and he's providing advice for us, and if the law doesn't say you can't do it, but the law probably says you have to be able to do it, I mean, it doesn't give you permission to do it, so it's not saying you can't, but you have to have an authority to do it. I understand the general law village stuff, but it's a separate law for the power agency, which is separate from the general law village. I mean, this is a separate entity on its own, and so you gotta go by the rules that govern it, and it's just different, cause you could have villages or cities. I'm simply gonna rely on Steve. No one's trying to exclude you, or bill in anything. It's just, for whatever set of reasons, a question came up, it was asked, and it's like, oh, shoot, you know, it wasn't done right. So, trying to correct something that probably should not have been since, what'd you say, 83 or something. No one's picking on anybody, it's just, for whatever set of reasons, a question came up, and the lawyer is saying, hey, this is how it should be, so.
Also, Steve
I can't
mentioned to
disagree
me
with
that he had mentioned this to Glenn White, many years ago. I don't know if he mentioned it to Jack Barrow. He was probably not counsel when Jack was here, but he did mention this to Glenn White that, about the alternate. So it's been out there for a long time. This is the first time I ever heard about it. I felt I needed to bring it to your attention when I hear things like that.
Yeah, and I guess just to echo, I mean, there's no intent to silence anybody, so again, that's kind of a, I wanted what Steve told me. If Steve said yes, I'd say yes. If he said no, he said no. I mean, it's kind of, you put yourself out and you're kind of making the rest of us look like we're trying to do something we're not. There's no intent to that, Chris. So, how you feel whatever you want, but I just go on what Steve told us. We did it the first time, I thought we should do it the second time, so. If he would've said yes, I have no problem with him being in there, but I want to be consistent, so, and again, I'm not an attorney, so, but there's no intent.
Okay, so Paul will distribute all this information and then probably either October, November, bring it back, so whatever time you all need,
So then he will mail us, cause I'm gonna cross off acting on it then, so you're gonna mail us stuff back on.
What I'll do is put in a memo.
Good.
I'll include the release opinion letter from Steve as the backup to the red line, the bylaw.
Perfect.
Same time, I'm also going to include the other bylaw amendments that are changes that were proposed a year ago that the board has yet to take action on, just to get it back out in front of everybody. So I'll include all of those.
We've taken those to some of our boards, right?
I think some of you have. I got confirmation that you did. I didn't get confirmation from anybody else. That's why I brought it back up. So this was back in May of last year.
So if we did it, we don't have to, but if anybody did not, they should do it.
They should do it.
Okay.
So I'll resend it for those of you that, just so you have it.
All right, moving on. Updates on FOIA policy.
Yes, so Chris Bernard was the FOIA coordinator, so this is an update to those changes. Had one typo, I fixed that with the finance director on the first document. That was the only change in the policy, was the naming of the coordinator. And then in the public,
Written public summary of FOIA procedures and
Yeah.
guidelines.
so that one's got a little more ink on it. That's, and again, the one that was on the website was correct and it had Chris's on there, but the actual copy that I could find was actually prior to that when Chrissy been camping. But regardless, these are the changes, updates, the contact, the, contact number, phone number. There's just some other grammatical things. This was copied over from a city that nobody caught some of the city references in there, so these were all passed by Steve Mann. He has approved those changes, so unless there's questions.
So
Clinton will make a motion to, I guess I'd say adopt the amended FOIA policy.
Hillsdale will second that.
Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed?
I was
Yeah,
aye.
I was thinking that you were
Thank
slow.
you.
You guys are sleeping over there. Okay, moving on to 7E. Pardon?
Yeah, I didn't know if the closed session now being removed from the last item, if there was anything.
Would
you
the
wanted to-
board,
Is
accept
the
moving
agenda
7E later to the agenda?
I think that'd be appropriate. I don't know if it's appropriate for discussion now, but the 8H, can we just, 8H in,
What's 8H?
8H, to go into closed session is to consider material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute.
What's 8H? I have an
Oh,
8.
under the.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Oh,
under
under-
closed session.
Under closed session.
Another
Oh,
closed
going
session.
into closed session,
Section.
to discuss
Gotcha.
power supply contract discussion, is that a valid reason to go into, closed session?
Yes,
So,
it's a legal one for electric.
under 8H for state statute?
I don't know the number, but it's a legal one, because you don't want to be able to disclose what you're willing to pay or not pay, or terms of a contract for power. It's a law back a few years ago that gave you that right.
Well, originally I was concerned about both closed sessions, so I printed out the closed session, thing. I can't find anywhere where other than discussing real estate, not that I'm opposed to discussing that, I just wanna make sure we're doing it right. I was more opposed to the, F, which was, I appreciate you removing that. But the E, I did start looking at that, and I'm curious if we're legal to go under closed session there, cause I don't, under H, which is cited on the agenda, says it's for consider material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute. I don't think power supply contract would be anything under state.
I
or
think there
federal
may be
statute.
some reference back to 448, which establishes the joint action in regards to the competitive nature of
Okay.
power supply contracts,
Okay.
but I'll,
If we're fine with
again,
that, I'm
this
fine with
was,
that. I'm not trying
this
to,
is,
on that one, I'm not trying to be difficult, I just wanna
Yeah,
make sure we're doing it right and doing it.
Under one of the energy bills, and I can't remember, it wasn't the most current one, that was
2 years
one of
ago,
the things.
like 3 to 5 years
There was
ago.
one of the state statutes on, again, I can't remember what energy bill it was at the state. They
Okay.
gave us that right to discuss, basically, terms and conditions of
The
that.
problem
I'll
is-
review it, I'll review it, and make sure
Okay.
we
I
cite
just
the
wanted to
right
make
one,
sure.
I don't.
That was, but if that's the case, I'd support moving E and F around, would that?
Well, I'd like to just, we'll
Alright.
move E down later.
That's only
We'll
here,
just,
right, right.
So, all right, well, let's move on to 7F, general manager's contract discussion. Kevin, Dave, I'm not sure. I looked at both of you.
That didn't float. Here, that one floated. So basically, there was a subcommittee asked to look into, the general manager's contract and see if there were some changes. There were some concerns expressed about, basically from memory, would be, the severance of 14 months. There was an issue with if the contract wasn't renewed, then severance kicked in. So with that, I was trying to see if I could address some of those concerns. And what I do is I put a draft in front of you for discussion purposes. Basically, just start from the beginning. We'd look at entering into an agreement now in 19 that would be effective for July of 20. Section 1A refers to Glenn White. Well, he's gone, so there was language when there was a joint position, so that goes away. You can then see the severance part in 1B, that the contract's not renewed, that severance provision goes away, which I think is a good thing. Then we go into 1C, and in there, basically, it's a 3-year deal. It used to be that it was a rolling 3 years, so every 3 years it renews and could go on for eternity. And I don't think that's necessarily good. I mean, put a 9-year or a 6-year, put a term limit on it. What was discussed and is presented to you, it's a 3-year contract, and then if we don't reach an agreement, it renews for 1 year, and then you got a year to sort of figure things out. So I think that addresses one of the concerns that I heard about a rolling contract, for a lack of better words. I didn't like D, because D was basically, if you wanna do something different, you have to give a 360-day notice. Well, why can't it be a 90-day notice? I mean, if the board doesn't like something, we could say to Paul, we don't like something, or Paul wants to work on something, he can come to us and say, let's try to correct something. So 90 seems to be more appropriate. I'm gonna run through the whole thing, then we'll come back to questions, if you don't mind. Then, well, we did a compensation, we just threw the next step in there, in the pay, from the 205, I believe, to go to the next step at 215. And then we got rid of it, it'll just be reviewed annually, is what we said, and sort of stopped and got rid of that last sentence. Then under 3B, we put step increases in for subsequent years. Here we just say the board will determine the appropriate pay increases after the evaluation. We go down to 5B, and it said vacation leave. Well, it's now PTO, actually, that was changed a few years ago, and not to exceed 5 weeks. That 5 weeks really needs to be 240 hours, because that's a cap in the
Well,
first.
I think that, consistent with the PTO policy, it's just what's on the books gets paid out at time of.
And we can tweak that too now, because the 5 weeks isn't, it was in the contract here. If you go in the end, it's not in, you'll see I have it added. I just think, hey, let's be consistent where it's in. So the front was slightly different than the back. I think you should make reference to them. I think what Paul says is correct. The caps will be based on the PTO policy, which is good, and that can be tweaked. So, if you go down to 9C, resignation, what's whether formal or informal? There is one or there isn't one, so a resignation. Then you go in, and these are some of the comments that I heard too, about the severance being 14 months. Some people are happier with 12. It's a little more common. 14 is not uncommon. There's people that have 2 years out there, but 12 is more common. In 1D, we have the 5 weeks, but really it's the 240, but really it's what Paul said. It should be the cap, whatever the PTO policy says, personnel policy. And then on the resignation, there's a new one. It's got 90 days there. That probably could be a 30-day one. So if you're on 11A, you'll see a 90-day written notice. If we're dropping ours, then it's only fair. If we're only giving 12, not only, but if we're changing 14 to 12, then I think it's fair that the general manager could give 30. That's a more common type term. Change the address on number 15, I guess it probably is a good idea. And that's the highlight of everything. Now, questions, just so you have an overview. And I know we're not looking for you to adopt it today, but I want to get some comments on what you like and don't like, because the concept is, I tried to incorporate the things that I thought I heard from people, put them into a document. Then, once we get those, we ultimately then have to go to the general manager to get his comments, because I don't have any formal comments from him. I have casual comments, but nothing formal. And then we sort of get things figured out.
I have a question on 5B. Do you still need to have the first sentence, up to the 256 hours?
Oh, thank you. No, that won't be in there, because that's a starting up thing too. Yeah, thank you, I missed that. Yeah, so that whole sentence would go away then.
Just cut that one quick.
Thank you, no, I missed that, thank you. Yeah, I thought I got it, but darn.
I guess my comment would be, Kevin's heard my comments because I was part of the team, with Kevin and I working on this. So, my comments are already incorporated.
I see this was draft 4, so I imagine there was lots of discussions. So.
No, we had nothing to discuss.
Good.
I'm trying to formulate it here. have a lot of comments. A couple, I'll try to be brief. As the village has made its stance clear on this issue, it's difficult for me to participate in discussing a new contract, especially a 3-year contract, and one where our feelings have been made pretty clear on. So I would be, so it's tough for me to make comments and suggestions when my overall arching opinion is out there and I think well known. I will make a couple comments, just, I mean, my intent as the village we would be done before we would, before we would be doing a new contract. So whatever group remaining would be doing this, but I will make a couple comments. The one big thing we came about last meeting was over the severance issue and the wording of it, and how it was worded that even if we gave the 12-month notice, the severance would still apply, which would lead to a final year payout of that over $450,000. I thought that we would clear that language up at least to be that if there's you wouldn't have the 12-month notice and severance. Am I mistaken that wasn't cleared up? Or
Yes, you are.
that was cleared up?
Yes,
Okay.
that'd be 1B,
1B?
the last part going away.
Okay.
I was very specific. 'cause
Okay, I'm
I
sorry I missed that part. Got you. Okay.
I've tried to address everything I heard. I could have missed things, but
Right.
I tried to, not everything, I tried to address the big things I heard.
Okay.
And that was one, the 14 was one. Those are the two big ones. There's another one, I can't think of it.
Okay. I appreciate I missed that. I was looking at the, right there, I got it. I was looking under the wrong section there. The date, it says 3-year contract, but I see it says 2019 to 2023. Would that be a 4-year then? Under B?
Well, it doesn't start, it starts in 19 because my intent would be we'd execute it, say, in September, but it won't be effective, you'd have the old contract is effective through July of 20, so it starts in July of 20 and goes forward. So it's weird because you're correct, it has 19 when it starts, which, well, you can do math, it's
Right,
4.
right, 4.
But it's really 3 because it doesn't start until
Okay.
July 1 of 20, Dave?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, I hesitated.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
good
Other than that, I
catch.
won't beat the dead horse. I think my feelings are well known and on that, so.
Did we address some of your concerns? Though? mean,
I
that was
think
my
the biggest
intent.
concern that I had was that, and you said it was addressed under 1B, there where it was, that was probably one of the biggest ones, concerns there. so.
1B, 1C, 3. Is it 3A?
I think the other
No,
concern
no,
was
no.
the automatic escalating salary, and that was addressed too.
That's
So,
addressed
that was
in
addressed.
3B.
So I do recognize those
10C was the
changes.
other, to address the concerns I heard from you.
Yep.
I just thought we could put something together. We had a little mixed feeling on some things, but this is what we put together as a group. One of my thoughts was it would be good if we could get something executed now, because then it's in play. And then these provisions would kick in now. But if you have the current one that goes through June of 20, then that language kicks in, but hey, it was teamwork, and this is where the subcommittee ended up. And give and take.
Other comments on this agreement? I do have a question. There's no more comments on this. What's the next step? What's the process? I know you and Dave have put a lot of work done on this. I don't know if legal counsels, I think you said in plural, have seen this.
No.
Okay.
I did not want to spend money on lawyers, because if no one likes it, then why bother?
I agree.
I guess what my thought would be, and it's me, Dave and I haven't discussed this, but my thought would be we need to get a feel for what the board thinks. I think Dave would agree. We gotta get a feel if you're somewhat okay with it, because then we have an issue where we need to have some legal review if the board likes us. So I guess we need to have some feel if we were able to address enough of your concerns that we can move forward with it to spend money on a lawyer, but I didn't really want to get carried away with a lawyer.
Just some comments on that, Tom. Kevin and I did have a discussion about next step, and kind of relating to some of Chris's comments about, as Hillsdale has made, has made our intention clear. so I struggle with answering what the next step is. And I think Kevin and I went back and forth discussing that, but I don't think we were able to come up with a solution.
And we do need to figure something out though, but maybe it's a board thing, not a committee thing, because the issue is, we've still got contractual things we need to deal with, you know, in the previous contract, and I'd like to get something in play to figure out, so we know what's going on. Hey, if we started on, do something in this fall for June or July 1, I guess, of next year, then that's what we would move forward with.
Are we putting the cart before the horse though, before this Jennings, or is it Jennings Strauss, is that the name of the company doing that, or
John
whatever?
Courtney.
Okay, I was so close.
They're lawyers.
I was close, they're lawyers, yes, exactly. Are we putting the cart before the horse before we get, something back from them? Because they could come back and say organizationally, we're better off, you know, doing X, Y, Z, or going with AMP or MPPA or whatever, and maybe should we be doing and I'm just proposing more of a rhetorical question, should we be doing a 3 or 4 year contract before we know what they're gonna say too as well? I'm not saying that we can't do the legwork up to that, but before we, you know, put a stamp on it, are we getting a little ahead of ourselves too as well? I'm just asking.
No, good question, and we struggled.
Yeah.
I
We
look
discussed
at-
it.
Oh, yeah, and I look at it that you need to do something, because if you don't do anything and we decide to stay here, or if there's a transition, doing this study is gonna be a few months, then you got lawyers, then you gotta go through, and once you find out legally you can do stuff, then you actually have to do it. You need someone to do those things, and if your key people leave, well, you're in trouble. So maybe some things could be tweaked a little bit, but you better lock in the key people. And if we are gonna transition, I mean, it's Paul, it's Bob, it's, you know, Harold, you got key people here, and you might wanna lock them in, just like we did with the power agency when we were closing it down, just say, look, let's do a deal with them, because otherwise, these people aren't crazy. If they see things are closing down next summer, you might have nothing. So my thought is, yeah, we probably should do something.
Yeah, and we, you know, if it takes Courtney 3 to 4 months for his study, and Kevin and I discussed it in the spring, you know, that puts us towards the end of the year. We would know potentially, you know, at least by the end of the year, 6 months in advance. Before this current contract would come into place. And that's what I kind of struggle with, is what you brought up, which was, should we sign a 3-year contract before we get that information? And again, as I said to Tom, we didn't really
And
come up
there's-
with an answer for that.
And the way Dave worded that, the thought came to my mind, there's a way to deal with it. We've got a contract through June of 20, you know, maybe you do a 2-year deal or a 1-year deal with a renewal of 3 or something. I don't know, you gotta do something, because you got key people you have to lock up, because say you go through, and I don't have a clue how this is gonna work, I just know that nothing ever works as quick as you want, and it's a complicated decision with volumes of legal pages. Say we get something later this year, then we have to talk about it. Well, then you got lawyers that need a couple months to figure things out, and we have to talk about them, and you know, we've not been exactly the best at making quick decisions, because these are complicated. And what if it's a mixed vote, and what if I wanna go to AMP, and you wanna go to MPPA, and you wanna go to IMPA, and you guys wanna stay? I mean, how do you deal with all that? And now you're talking another 6, 12 months to figure all that craziness out. I like the fact we're looking at it, but let's not rush this where we do something stupid. I know you don't like the study, Chris, you voted no on it, but you've gotta do the study, and you gotta be careful, because you don't wanna find yourself in a jam. You've got extremely low price power right now. Last thing you wanna do is go to someone that's gonna cost you more, and you gotta raise your residence rates by 4%. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but if you look at your cost for NPPA, you're going up 20 grand a year. Well, if you go to AMP, you guys are saving just over 19, it's 40 grand a year. You look at your current cost on the sheet that you have here on the thing, that's a 4% rate increase to your customers. You wanna make that casual discussion? I don't think so. Your residents would be glued if you make them pay 4% more for their power because you didn't slow down for a few months and do homework. You need to do the homework to make sure you protect yourself and make the right decision.
I have a question, which Paul, have you agreed with the committee on this?
I've looked at it, Kevin and I've talked about it.
Casually only.
Yeah, I've just made a few
Okay.
comments about
And
it.
we're talking, and this is your contract, so, okay, I just had to ask that question.
It's casual comments only, it's subject to, and we have issues we need to deal with. I think we will have legal fees that we need to incur for our general manager to make sure things are protected in light of certain things I think the agency should incur. We will have our own legal costs that we need to incur to look at this and figure something out. I'd sort of like to get a feel for what people think. Maybe the three turns into one to address some of Chris's or Dave's concerns. We need to do something. I know this is something that, Paul, if I was him, I won't put words in his mouth, but, he likes the current contract, can't blame him. But I've had discussions with him, and there's a possibility of him doing some things less than he currently has in his contract if we're willing to do certain things to get a contract in play. 12 months is really routine for severance, but, it's a sacrifice on his part, and, it's different, so, I don't know. I think it's a working together kind of thing. We both give and take. I think we could end up with a contract. I want to protect Clinton's and the agency's best interest, and I just don't think this thing will move as fast as some people believe it can. And something this big, I don't want it to move fast. I don't mean that in a bad way, like I'm stalling. I've been in this business a long time. I need time to mull it over. This is a big change. I want to make the right decision. I don't want to go in and make a wrong decision, because you're talking major money. As I look with the Union City situation, again, you're talking about a 4% rate increase to your residents if you make the wrong decision. That's $400,000 over a 10-year period. I sure want to make that decision. Mine's similar, but I think slightly bigger. The cost per year, not the percentage. So I want to be careful that I do it right. I don't want to force an increase on my residents that's not justified. I want to be able to sit there and look them in the eye and go, you know what? It is the right thing, and here's why. That's enough. And
So coming back to
talking
the
too much.
employment agreement, Ken, do we feel that we should get the legal review and have that back here for
September.
September? This was August, right? And I'm assuming Paul would do likewise, so if he wanted to, that's up to him. Is that next step okay? I'm seeing nodded by consensus, so,
The only difficult I have, did everybody nod? I mean, they're okay with the legal review?
I didn't see Chris's.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
Sorry,
I hear
that's
my name,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
Okay with the legal review.
Okay.
The only problem I have is with these changes, it's a little difficult because we're gonna force our employee to incur some legal costs on something. It might be helpful if we say, look, you got 2 hours, to have a different review. I don't know. What do board people think? It just doesn't seem fair that we're making some changes, and there's some craziness going on with the Attorney General, with other things, with state police, that I think it's appropriate that he's gotta have a legal counsel look at it to protect his interests. And it seems a little unfair for us to incur them to have that cost. This is nothing Paul and I discussed.
I got something to say, but I wanted somebody else to say something. I, personally, when I have my agreement, with the city, that was my expense. So I'm gonna disagree with you, Kevin.
Okay.
No one else spoke up, so I think this is something that is a very simple review, but that's my personal opinion. I just think that should not be burdened on us.
Okay. So
No one
we're
else
gonna
said
go-
anything, so I jumped in, so.
I would agree.
You deal with Steve more than I do. Do you wanna get that to Steve?
I can get this to Steve, and then Paul can decide if,
And then you can let him know that this is the committee,
sure.
cause I don't have Steve's email or phone number, so.
Well, I will, send this and,
Do you want
I-
electronically?
yes, absolutely. And then I'll copy all of you in that, on my email to Steve. And then we'd like it back in time to where it can be part of the agenda. Okay,
I can do that. I will get that to you.
all right. Thank you too for spending 15 minutes on this.
oh, this was enjoyable, we had fun, didn't we? Get nothing else going on.
I know. I know what you're saying. Okay, I guess with this time, what I'd like to do, we still have the power supply discussion, coming out of that. I don't know if there will be any, probably there won't be any action, so, it'll be just a discussion of the board in closed session on the power supply. So what I'd like to do is, if it's okay, move on with the remainder of the agenda and move on to public comment on non-agenda items that we have number 8 on our agenda. So, any comments on non-agenda items?
I'll just make one comment. I appreciate, Chris Mathis, Union City, sorry. Appreciate Penny's comments earlier. I think those were some very good questions. I do appreciate her coming and recording this. She doesn't get paid to do that. I just met her at the last meeting, and I think it's very noble to come here, spend her own time for transparency, recording these, putting these on Facebook, and I appreciate that very much. And also appreciate her comments too, her questions she asked earlier.
Yes, sir. Could you identify yourself for the
Yeah,
record?
Tony Safransky. I'd like to comment, I'm not sure how it applies. Part of it will be with Penny's comments on Facebook. I'm gonna try to stay non-emotional. I'm with Elsing and Volkers. I'm shocked at the rhetoric of this whole thing. Chris, to be honest with you, I don't think you'd be sitting there having these complaints if you'd have called us and got another side. Penny, you're making comments on Facebook that are defamation of character. You're stating things as fact that are lies. If anybody would like to come to my office and have an open door meeting of my employee's salary and role, I would love to have that. I know every process that this building started at. So some simple things, like I was contacted by Colorado Board of Public Utilities, not Scott Morrison. There's some major things left out of all the public posts that are driving this motion. No one's contacted me with all the digging that Penny's doing, all the deep digging and investigating. We've never received a phone call from anybody. Does anybody in this room ever called anybody from our company, the one that built the building, that has the coup, I think, or some of the words of a bid rigging? Has anybody ever contacted us? No. No, it's a one-sided, angered argument, and the purpose isn't for anything other than defamation of Paul. That's it. So you're welcome, Penny, to come to my office and ask how this went. You're welcome. I will talk to you about my employee's salary. I will talk to you, Chris, and answer anything on how this went, why our bid was submitted the way it was submitted, who requested my bid, how it was reviewed, who approved the bid invite, who approved and approved Scott's bid invite. Some things that may make some of this stuff go, man, maybe it's not what it seems. But I'll tell you right now, I'll speak on Paul's character during this, as well as anybody else involved with it. There was zero intent to profit from anybody. No one from my company at any level, took anything other than a salary. There was no bonuses given. So the point of my thing is, we're sitting here talking about a salary renegotiation, recontracts over something that is getting a one-sided version.
No,
Yes. Have you ever contacted my office?
I don't need to
Just
contact
no
you.
discussion.
Exactly.
This is your.
So my point is, it's an open door. If anybody wants to know why the things were submitted the way they were, who financially got reimbursed from this project, how the design came, how the finishes came, how the budget changed. So it'd be nice if we talk about transparency and clarity to get an other side of the transparency. I'd be more than happy to discuss it. But I will caution anybody stating facts of my employee, her role or her salary, in a public forum, that's a lie. Because that's a defamation of character, and I do have legal representation to go against those things happening further. So I will ask of everybody on this room that when the results come out to when you're made a mistake, you post that as well.
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, did you want to say anything more at this time?
No.
Okay.
I will clarify, I do want to say that I did talk to somebody else, Volkers, must be above you, I think you've been there for quite a while, so I have, and there's other things we've done. My main complaint has been very well articulated with the process from the Colorado Board of Public Utilities, and I made that very clear to who I talked to there, Elsing and Volkers. So I do want to clarify that my issues have been with that process, the way the bid process was handled with the Colorado Board of Public Utilities. I won't get into all the details here, I do think a full investigation will be warranted and will be forthcoming. And that's all that we're asking for from the village, is the full accounting or of that investigation. I have never pointed the fingers at your company or anything like that. So, and all I'm asking for from the village is a full and transparent investigation. I think that's warranted since the Village of Union City's money went towards you and towards your company to build this in a roundabout way now that we're leasing it.
Right.
And I think that's a fair assessment, and since our money went towards Paul's salary when that happened, I think it's fair to have a full accounting and transparency for that. And that's all that I'm asking for, and I appreciate your comments so very much.
No, I would appreciate that too, but full transparency needs talking to the other side, not just the one side of the contractor that didn't get the award.
100% with you, and that's what we're asking for. We're asking for a full thing, somebody else to step in that isn't me, that isn't Penny, that's an actual trained investigator, somebody to actually come in and talk to you, and that way there's no emotions involved in that, no thing. And I think that's the best way to handle it, and that's what we're looking for.
Chris, I support that. It's just a waste of money.
I appreciate
You
that.
got
Thank you.
full transparency without it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming. Other public comment? Well, if you want, I'm doing public comment, and then
Okay.
can we do it under,
Wherever, we just don't have a,
yeah, commissioner, well, I was going to do the municipal updates too, so, okay. Thank you for all being here, and we'll just jump right into municipal updates or commissioner comments, and so I'm gonna start with Dave.
all right, we'll do it under the appropriate heading. Just to address the statement about E&V, as Chris has indicated, this request has very little to do with E&V at this point. It has to do with the process on the cold water side of how the building was handled, the documentation that was distributed supporting that process, and how the decision was made in their selection of the ultimate contractor. And ultimately, there are things that have changed over our 1.5 year discussion on this. One would be for my business resident, Folk Construction. We were originally told he was disqualified for not bidding it properly. Well, after getting the bids through Ms. Swan's Freedom of Information Act request, I would have to object to that was appropriate, because he actually did exactly what was specified of him in the specifications. So that really has nothing to do per se with E&V. I know there's some connections there with Mr. Beckhusen's wife being hired and some other things, but that is what the crux of why my mayor and Hillsdale felt a more thorough investigation was needed. Because when we had the investigation done as an agency, the actual bid documents were not reviewed by the investigator, and up until a few weeks ago, myself or Chris never seen those documents, which would have brought the same questions up much earlier in the process. So this, I would just say that the new documents that have surfaced is what has brought this back to light.
Can I comment on that?
No. No, we're under
We
that.
can't do that.
Yeah, so we can't do that, but, so that's where I'm at. I do take offense, Kevin, to the word craziness, because getting an appropriate, complete, and a thorough investigation done is not craziness, and getting to the bottom of what happened here. If nothing happened here wrong, then great, I hope that's the case. But if something did happen inappropriately, that needs to be come to light as well, just for public transparency and whatnot. And I'm, again, not saying anything did, but it appears that way to me. Also, Ms. Swan asked some questions early on. The first was about Mr. Budd's appointment to Century Bank and Trust. I had no knowledge of this appointment until recently. That being said, while there might not be anything wrong with that, and I'm sure Jeff has already looked into this technically, but it could, in my personal opinion, it could give the appearance of a conflict of interest. because in effect, Mr. Budd is overseeing both brothers as the board of directors of a bank and the board of directors of MSCPA. So there could be, in my opinion, a potential conflict of interest, or at least the appearance of one. In regards to the building, yes, we do pay, it's based on the bills paid, we're at $6,695 a month. I definitely understand your concerns about that cost, and does that make sense with, 5 or 6 employees? Because I agree, it's, $1,000 a person. That's something that maybe this board will need to discuss in the future, depending on what comes out of the courtney results. So, that being said, I appreciate your comments, I appreciate your comments as well, sir.
Why don't you do your member municipal, the next agenda will be commissioner comments and member municipal update, so I just added it also. Hillsdale.
Let's see, we've wrapped up our sewer treatment plant project. Getting ready to start some heating and air work on our sewer treatment plant, and nothing related to sewer treatment plants are inexpensive. I think that project is about $360,000. We've got a lot of road construction going on, about 3 projects, which, it's always one of those things you say to your residents, be careful what you wish for. And when you say you haven't had road construction in a number of years, and then you get a lot of it at once, then they start talking about the inconvenience. So,
For 46 years.
Yeah. So,
No matter what.
yeah, so we have that road construction going on, and we're also started working on renovating our theater with the help of MEDC. Basically, it's 100 years old and in disrepair, so MEDC is helping us to renovate it into a new facility. So those are the things we have going on.
Chris?
Real briefly, we completed the outside of our water tower, painted that. We've got a Union City Chargers logo on one side and the Village logo on the other. It came out really nice. That should be in service later this year. We're making some progress on our substation. We're looking at doing a new substation. We have some meeting with a financial management group to discuss the best way to proceed with that project with as little impact as possible to the ratepayers. But our old substation needs replacing, and as long as our as with our switch gear, so we're looking to do that all in one shot. We have, what's that?
2 or 3 million or something? It's a bad number.
We are down. It started out 4.5, and we're down to probably around 3 million estimate. So we changed, we reconceived the project a little bit, and then we're looking from there how to best move forward to finance that project. So that's moving forward. Hopefully by next year we'll have something in place. Marijuana, we did do the marijuana ordinance for recreational, and we're